All right, this is our company and we'll just kind of get started. We've got 10 plus 3, so slowly getting more people added in here. So first, I'd just like to give a quick background about Proactive Seniors in case you're new to us. We are an advisory service and we're located in Calgary, Edmonton, and Kelowna. And our role is to help seniors and their adult children to make sure that they have the information and the guidance that they need to make proactive and early planning decisions with regards to their health and their wellness and where they want to live and who's going to help take care of them. And we just really feel so passionate about making sure that seniors can access the right help at the right time so that they can stay healthy and happy and safe and just live a really great life and enjoy time with their loved ones. And so our team of advisors is here to help support those decisions and navigating and making sure people have the right information so they can age well. Make sure I push the right button to move this forward. So I'll talk a little bit about the services we offer at Proactive Seniors. So Proactive Seniors Planning is a service where we are primarily helping seniors who are wanting to stay in their home as they age. And so we create a very comprehensive plan that outlines exactly what they uniquely need to do to try and increase their success and likelihood of staying home safely. So that often includes referral to different types of services or programs or benefits or resources, and we really are just trying to help the family and the senior know what is going to be their specific plan so that they can stay home safely. The second service that we offer is seniors housing support, and we're going to be talking a lot about housing today. And for that service, it's just so important to us that if a senior is going to move outside of their home and into a senior living setting or a retirement residence or even a care facility, we really feel strongly that it's important to make the best possible match. And so we help seniors with that matching so we can identify for them what facilities are best suited to their particular needs and preferences so that they have a much increased opportunity to thrive and be happy and really enjoy that experience. Dementia Care Coaching is a service where we offer advice and guidance and navigation to families who have a loved one who has dementia, and sometimes that's in relation to them staying at home and sometimes moving to a care facility or both, and generally just trying to help navigate that journey. Our family support service is a service that we provide to our clients who are in the planning or the housing support areas where we help to fill in some of those gaps. And so if the family isn't available to maybe take someone on a tour, or take them to an appointment, or help them transition into a new seniors residence, we're here to do that. And we just really want to make sure that there's no little gaps that people fall into and that they have the support they need. If we're giving them a list of tasks to accomplish, sometimes it helps to have us help with those tasks. And then finally, occupational therapy and physiotherapy. So we have both of those professions on our team, and they can provide their traditional support as well in a mobile capacity. So if you're at home or you're living in a retirement residence and you need some help with a safety evaluation or understanding what kind of equipment or adaptations you need, our OT can come out and do that. And then if you are needing to have some rehabilitation or work on balance or fall prevention, then our physio can come out and provide some one-on-one support to wherever you are for that too. So those are the services we offer at Proactive Seniors. And then we'll get into the meat of it, which is our presentation. I just have to make sure I'm in the right spot here. Okay, so the topic of our presentation today is making a move. Is it time to consider a senior living community? So I'd like to first introduce Judy DeLeo, who is our Calgary Seniors Housing Specialist Extraordinaire. She is truly a miracle worker, and I have lots of evidence to prove that. And she's going to share with us today some of her many experiences and expertise in housing support. So say hi, Judy.
Hi, everybody. And I'll just comment that my part of this conversation today is going to be filled with a lot of examples and stories. And so maybe you'll hear something that you can relate to or you've experienced or that you have questions about when we're done. So look forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Judy. So we're just going to start with this overview of seniors living. And we know that the terminology in terms of seniors living is very confusing, and it's actually, a very complex area, and lots of people get quite confused and frustrated trying to understand it. So I created this little slide just to try and simplify it. So it's a bit of an overview, and essentially what it shows you is that there's 3 levels of support for seniors living and for seniors living. And the first is independent living. So in independent living, it essentially means that you may be getting some degree of meal support. There may be a meal plan involved in the residence. There's likely to be lots of activities and social things going on. And in terms of health care, the care is kind of more in the format of what you would get like home care at home. So you can have scheduled and intermittent care in an independent living setting, but it's usually provided in more of a home care kind of style. Supported or assisted living is the next level up in care, and that means that the facility has 24/7 care support. Ideally, the care they're providing is still on a scheduled basis, but they're definitely there overnight in case of an emergency or in case something crops up. So it's a little bit higher level of care. And then the next level from there is long-term care. And long-term care is what people may have traditionally understood to be nursing home care. And that's where, the person who is living there has pretty complex care needs and requires quite a lot of medical attention. And, in reality, not everybody ends up in long-term care. It's kind of a place where seniors may end up going if they have quite a complicated health history, but it doesn't mean everybody needs to go to that level of care. So what's interesting is who pays for these different levels of care. So at the level of independent living, you can access that through subsidized housing for lower income seniors, or you pay for it privately. So those are the 2 sort of funding sources for independent living, either out of your own pocket or if you qualify in subsidized low income. Supportive and assisted living is generally kind of co-funded through the public health system. So whether you're in BC or Alberta, there's a partial pay from the family or the senior and a partial pay from the government, or you can pay privately for that level of care. And long-term care is primarily funded through the public health system, and there are usually some options for private pay, but they're kind of few and far between, a little hard to find. So that's just a really quick overview on the different levels of senior living, just to kind of get yourself familiar with the terminology. Okay, so the first slide we're going to talk about here is we've kind of identified some of the most common challenges that our clients come upon when they're trying to decide whether to move into a senior living setting. So we thought we'd kind of think about what are the things that most people struggle with and kind of have a conversation about those. So the first one is just the idea of being totally overwhelmed with the whole concept. So often people will start by looking through a housing directory or checking out a couple of locations that maybe their friends or family have told them about, or if they're dealing with public health, they might be given a booklet with a long list of facilities that they need to pick from. And this can feel like a really overload of information, but it's actually quite vague information. It doesn't really give you much direction. There's so many options for seniors in terms of seniors housing. In Calgary alone, there's 220 options. And so it can be really difficult and overwhelming to try and sift through that and figure out which subset is really relevant to you. And I'm sure, Judy, you've had lots of experiences with clients feeling totally overwhelmed.
Absolutely. I know some level of overwhelmed probably is attached to every situation, I'm sure, but I recently started working with somebody and that's exactly how she felt. And so she started off, actually a couple of years ago, she first started to do a little bit of research and she halted right away. And then this time again, she had a copy of the Kirby Housing Directory. And she looked through that and she was quite confused, and she made a phone call just to one place, and just the information she was being given, it was great information, but at the same time it already felt a little bit confusing for her, the terminology that's being used. And so what she ended up doing is just pulling back and saying, I can't do it. I know we need to make a move, but I don't even know where to start. And so, her daughter reached out, and we were able to just put her mind at ease by going through those options with her more specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can be really,
really
hard.
Yeah, no, sorry. I know, like, that can be a big barrier for people, and that's what it was in this case, right? It's hard for them to compare locations, like apples to apples sort of thing, because there are so many differences between buildings, and it really does help to have a clear picture of what their most important requirements are, and then create a comparison table so that those specific requirements are evaluated.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. Yeah.
I can think of another example too, working with a client, and they were given the list. So he needed to go to long-term care. And so, sometimes that process can take some time as far as that evaluating to what level of care somebody may need. And that can take some time. But once that's established, then, quite often Alberta Health Services gives somebody that booklet that you mentioned, and with that list of options, whether it's the supportive living communities or long-term care. And then it's quite typical. They'll say, maybe we need 48 hours or a couple of days. We need your top 3 choices. Mm-hmm. And that's overwhelming because the person is not sure, what the differences are in these places, and, which ones are close to them, and how to make one choice over another. So,
yeah. Yeah, and that feeling of being totally overwhelmed, it just makes them stop in their tracks, right? So that's one of the bigger challenges that we see, and trying to help, we really try and help people manage that information overload. So the next challenge that we often see is people struggling with like a misconception, or they might have a preconception of what retirement living is really like, and they don't necessarily recognize that there's such a broad variety of options and price points and care levels. And a lot of times people come in with this idea, and the idea can really stall them because they think, oh, I don't want that. So
absolutely. Like if they've had a parent or a spouse or a loved one that have been in a nursing home or long-term care, and then they assume that kind of represents all senior living. Mm-hmm. And, it really is important to not make those assumptions, because there's a lot of variety in senior living, and they can be very different from what someone assumes. So we really encourage people to have a look at a few places, get a realistic view of the lifestyle, and it may still not be their cup of tea, mm-hmm. but you don't know until you at least have a look at a few options.
Yeah, you're right. Not everybody, this isn't for everybody, and that's totally fine. But you want to have the information. You want to feel like you're playing with like a full deck of information, right? You're not just kind of making assumptions. So that's really important, to just even look at a couple of places. And oftentimes we'll hear people say, hey, that wasn't nearly as bad as what I thought it would be. So the other challenge that we see a lot is just distress around downsizing. And this can be a real roadblock for seniors and their families. They can't fathom, how they're going to sort through this collection of possessions that they have. And some of them have such strong emotional attachments. And we often find this can be a source of tension too between seniors and their adult children, because the children might be saying, come on, mom, come on, dad, you got to get rid of some of this stuff. And they can really kind of get their hackles up and say, leave me alone. I'm not ready to do that, or I don't even know how I would do that. So, I'm sure you've seen that quite often too, Judy,
yeah,
right?
I have. I recently met with a daughter and her parents, and just from moment one, the body language and the look on this on this mom's face was exactly that. She didn't even know where to start. And, you know, it was amusing to watch the husband sort of sit quietly off, because you could tell he's not getting into this conversation. But both the mom and the daughter were really overwhelmed at even where to start. And, you know, by giving them that reassurance that we can give them a checklist of things, of items to work through and to help with the decision process, but also to point them in the direction of these professionals, the downsizers, that do an incredible job. And from my experience, what I love is they have the compassion to understand the emotional dynamics around this process, but also that objective view, so they can be quite logical in that moment when the senior's trying to say, no, I want to keep this, and you know, they'll help work them through that process very kindly. So it's a great service.
You know, sort of taking their hand, right? And,
Yes.
and not necessarily forcing anything, but keeping them moving forward, right? So that's so important. The fourth challenge that we really see people struggle with is just putting off the decision for too long. And, you know, it's been kind of a common scenario during this last year of COVID, and very understandably so. You know, there was a lot of reason to maybe try and stay home longer or not move into a facility, you know, when there was challenges with perhaps infection, but even more so people worried about having to isolate in that setting. You know, we're coming through that, and we still, even before COVID, we found that people would wait too long, and the reason is they just wanted to stay home as long as they possibly could. But that decision can sometimes have a negative impact, because, you know, you might have way fewer options at that point. You know, you're leaving it so late that all of a sudden you really don't have a lot of choices. So maybe you can comment on that, Judy.
Yeah, we have, there's two current couples that come to my mind, and in both cases, they really wanted to be able to stay together. That is their number one desire. Mm-hmm. And in both of these couples, one of them, their health has deteriorated so much that it's becoming hard to find options for them that they can both be together in the same place. And for both of them, they're also expressing they want to be together in the same suite. And, you know, so, you know, we have been able to find locations for both of these couples where they can be together, and both of the care needs for both of them are going to be taken care of. But their choices were really limited because of how far along in their process they are. And another issue is with putting things off too long is that caregiver burnout. So if the spouse caregiver or the family caregiver, they get so exhausted and burnt out that now their health can almost become the bigger concern.
Yeah, we do see that quite regularly, and it's really worrying. You know, you think of that adage when you're on an airplane, put your mask on first, right? You have to make sure the caregiver is healthy and staying well, because their role is so important, and sometimes that means, you know, moving where they both can get some support, right? So rest for one and support for the other. Yeah. And then the final, this is a really tough one. You know, there's no simple answer for this, but the final challenge that we see families and seniors struggle with is just the idea of guilt. You know, really, you know, maybe they've made a promise that they will never, you know, put their parent in a facility, or they'll never move their spouse. But, you know, sometimes that promise is really holding them back on what is best for them. And it's just a really challenging thing to overcome, is that feeling of guilt.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of an example where I'm working with a couple, and his wife has dementia, and she is so scared about change. Mm-hmm. And, you know, her husband is so tired as the role, you know, of caregiver, and his health is really being compromised right now. And she's just not able to understand the dire situation that they're in. And both he and the family are feeling incredibly guilty for suggesting a move right now, because they know how scared she is. Mm-hmm. You know, and I mean, his health could falter. and he could end up in the hospital. And then that leaves the family making a very rushed move for his wife, for their mom, right? And they're both at high risk right now of an accident at home. And the children, they're trying to give their parents that space to make this decision on their own, but it's heart-wrenching. And you know, it's difficult to navigate and hard to balance. And, you know, however, like making a move right now would have so many positive benefits. It gives them a chance to adjust to a new living environment together.
Together, right? Yeah.
Together, exactly. And they'll both have the care that they need and have the support they need, so they can regain some of their health and their strength back. And, you know, it would be better for them to move together now, because the possibility is that they'll end up in separate locations if they wait till later.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that feeling of guilt about, you know, trying to hold to someone's wishes and it might not be in their best interest. It's a really hard thing for people to wrap their minds around, but many people struggle with it. So if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. It's a difficult thing to navigate through.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next slide we have is, we kind of listed the top 5 reasons that people do move, so that our audience can understand why are people moving and what are the reasons that they're making this decision. So we thought we'd start with the 5th most common and work our way down to the most common reason why our clients, or we see our clients move. So Judy, share with us, what are the top reasons why seniors are moving?
Absolutely. So the 5th top reason would be for lifestyle reasons. So, you know, often seniors, they're just ready for that change in responsibilities. They're not wanting to manage that home and house and yard, and they're tired of cooking meals and the grocery shopping and the housekeeping. And, you know, there's a lot of freedom when they can give up those activities when they're ready, and they'll make that move so that they've got more time and energy for their hobbies and maybe socializing and traveling and you know, just looking forward to giving up that responsibility, right? Our number 4 reason is being closer to family. And I'm actually really enjoying, I've just started working with, the daughter is here in Calgary and mom is in Edmonton, and mom is so excited to prepare to move down to be closer to her daughter and grandkids. And of course, they're wanting to even be right down in the same corner of the city and be really close by. So this mom is so excited. It's giving her a lot of renewed energy for sure. And, you know, often when family is starting to see changes in their parents' health, then they want to be closer so they can help more. And, you know, so sometimes families and their parents, they can't be in the same location, and that's where we can step into and help support the families when they can't be here. Yeah. So our number 3 is needing that social interaction. So I have a fun story of a lady. She was living in an apartment building, and it was the type of apartment building where there was a wide range of ages and demographics, and so she never saw anybody during the day, and people kind of kept to themselves and had their own lives. And so she made a move into a retirement residence, and she was a little on the younger side, but she was so ready, and she has totally embraced that, involved in the activities and having coffee with people, and she is really liking that opportunity for that kind of social interaction. And, you know, I know that can be the exception, because there's a lot of people who it takes more time to be comfortable knowing they need to make friends and make that adjustment. But, you know, ultimately they appreciate being in a more social environment, more recreation at their fingertips, right? Caregiver, our number 2 reason, and we're seeing so much of that, especially lately, as we just talked about. I think COVID put off a lot of wanting to move or, you know, relocate. So we're seeing an awful lot of caregiver burnout right now. I had one where the husband was just exhausted and burnt out and taking care of his wife at home, and he really did not want to move. He wasn't ready to leave the home, but he needed help. And she moved into a private pay community that offers enhanced care, and enhanced care is very similar to the public long-term care. And so she was able to get the care that she needed, and she thrived there. And he had the peace of mind knowing that he could go visit every day, but he got back, some of the things that he could do for his own well-being, but he felt so much better that she was getting the care she needed in that environment. Then our big number one reason is not thriving at home. And it's certainly the most common reason that we see why seniors tend to move. And some of those points could be that maybe they're not managing because they're seeing an increase in the need for home care coming in. And so it's becoming too expensive or complicated. Maybe the home is no longer a safe environment, whether it's someone's mobility, and that can be a big one, or cognitive issues. With mobility, we see washer and dryer down in the basement, or they've got food storage down there, or a pantry, etc. And it becomes pretty scary for them to navigate those stairs when their mobility is in question. And they may not be eating properly. And as many of us have heard that expression of the tea and toast. Well, I'll just make tea and toast, and over time that can certainly bring on its consequences, right? If somebody's not eating properly and their nutrition is compromised, as well as not enough fluid intake, actually, so. And then they could be just lonely or depressed, they're cut off from people a little more, and they're just generally starting to express a decline in their wellness, so they're ready to get around other people. And
yeah.
I know. Oh, I can think of an example. Sorry. I just was the story. Yeah.
More examples, the better.
I know. But this was a lady living in a basement suite in an older home, and she couldn't even get out of her basement suite without somebody coming to help. So someone would have to come over and take her walker and bring it up the outside concrete steps, and then come back down, help her up the steps. And then yard level was still above the city sidewalk. So there were 3 stairs going down to the city sidewalk. And so that same person would bring the walker down to the sidewalk and then help her down those stairs. And then she could be out for a walk. And then there was the danger, the safety risk in the basement suite, because the older home, it had the tiny little basement window up at the top of the wall, right? So it was impossible for her to get out of that basement suite unless somebody was there to help her. And so that was really a safety risk. And so she ended up moving into a subsidized apartment building, and she loves it. Well, I have to say, after being in a basement suite with very little windows, she was on the 8th floor of an apartment building that looked to the east. It actually had a window on the east and the south. And so the view was spectacular, and the sunrises, and so socially, she was able to connect with people, and she was eating better and so happy. That was a delightful scenario.
Yeah, it just feels so good to know they're in a safer setting, and they're happier, and they're healthier, and all of those things, right? So it's so worrying when they're just not in a safe setting. Well, thanks, Judy, for sharing the top reasons why we see that seniors move. Move on to our last slide, and this is 4 things that we would like you to consider if you're going to think about moving, and these are not your normal things that you're going to see on a list, or something that someone emails out, things to consider when you're moving. These are kind of unique and different things that we wanted to bring to your attention because they're important. They're important considerations, and not very many people necessarily think of them. So the first is aging in place. Aging in place is kind of a new term, a new concept that people bandy around, and it generally means that you can stay in one location and progressively get increased levels of care. Sounds like a great thing, but is it great for everyone? So, Judy's going to share, why it's important to consider, is aging in place the right thing for you?
Yeah, for sure. It's important to consider the relevance of aging in place that is unique to every individual. For some seniors who are younger and active, it might be more important for them to be in a setting where everyone is active. And they might not be as comfortable, with people that are needing high levels of care, or there's the presence of a lot of walkers or wheelchairs. And so for them, it might make sense to be in a fully independent location, and which will require likely a second move later on. For other seniors, they may not want to make that second move, or they've got a health condition where they can see that they're going to steadily be needing more support. So aging in place in one location might be very critical for them to consider in choosing the right place for them. So it's really important to understand what the individual would prefer and if the location they're considering really matches their preferences.
Right. And what's so great is there's all these options, right? There's places that are just strictly independent, and there's lots of places that have various degrees of care. And so, finding that right fit is so important. The next thing that we like people to consider is the idea of being a bit creative with combining public and private support. When we suggest this to people, they often say, "What? I didn't know you could do that. Like, I never thought of that." But there's some creative ways where we can sort of combine the two. So, maybe share a couple examples like that, Judy.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it might make more sense to choose a publicly funded suite and add some extra one-on-one support of a private companion instead of a private pay suite. If a senior is not going to utilize all the perks that come with a private location, and what they offer, it might be a better use of their dollars that will directly benefit that senior. And then conversely, sometimes in a private living community, instead of going up a tier in care, for example, from independent living to assisted living, which often has an increase in price, they may find that they can bring public home care or even occasional private home care for quite a long time before they need to move into a higher level of care, even within that facility. So it could be a logical cost-saving tactic for some situations, right?
Yeah. And it's important to kind of think of these things because it all kind of flows into your budgeting, right? And what choices you make depend on your financial position. And if you can think of how you might use both public and private resources, it might open up some options that you wouldn't have thought of. And that kind of leads me into the third thing, is that we really encourage people to understand their financial position. I would say almost universally, people see the price of private retirement residence and they have a bit of sticker shock. But even funded care, like supportive living and long-term care, a lot of people don't realize that there's a cost to that, and you pay out of pocket for your portion of that care. And so there's always a bit of a shock. But what we really encourage people to do is to do a budget, and we have a spreadsheet we can share. But look at all of your costs at home. What are the utilities, and what are you spending on food, and what are you spending on bringing home care in, or that nurse that does your foot care, or those different services, and then compare that to the cost of a retirement residence, public or funded, or whatever your option might be. And I think that people often see that gap closes, and that there is some recognition that the expense of moving into senior living can be quite reasonable considering all of the things that you're getting. So maybe Judy, share a couple examples of why understanding your finances is just really important.
For sure. We worked with a client, and it was actually the manager of that senior community that reached out to us because the resident had come to him with a lot of anxiety and worry over her finances. She'd been living there for quite a few years, actually, and she was running out of money. And so she was very afraid, looking down the road, of how her money was going to last. and it was really weighing heavily on her. So, you know, it was, I mean, thankfully we were able to find her a great subsidized senior lodge, and she's very happy and so relieved now to be in a more comfortable spending bracket for her. And, you know, it was great that he reached out to us to see if there was something that we could do, right? Because he really had her best interests at heart, for sure. You know, so it's really important not to overspend, but we also see the opposite scenario where seniors can afford maybe a larger suite or a better suited location, but then they're nervous to spend their savings. And so, you know, it's just really important to have some professional advice and to feel confident with your financial planning.
Yeah, I think it's just so important. And if you feel confident in your financial planning, you feel more confident with your choice. And then you really know that the choice that you made fits well with what your abilities are. So it's important to spend the time figuring that out. And then the last point that we really want people to consider is timing. You know, timing is important. We talked about that already when we said, you know, in some cases, you know, sometimes people wait too long. And so it's just really important that you're not putting off a decision until there's a crisis. It's the worst time, right, to try and start making these big choices.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we do advise seniors to start looking at their options early, even if they're planning to stay home for quite a while yet, because I mean, we all know, even for you and I and every single one of us, that things can change unexpectedly, and it's never a good idea, like you said, to try to make such an important decision, whether it's in a rush or in a crisis, right? So, you know, we suggest taking some time to think about what your own triggers to move might be. Perhaps it's when you're no longer driving, or when, you know, the home care needs to come more than twice a day. There can be any number of cues that are unique to each and every senior as to when it's time to consider your next new home, right? So, you know, begin to build your understanding of senior living, and even venture out to look at a couple of options that suit your preferences. You know, there's a lot of comfort in knowing that you have a plan in mind for your future, and you have time to learn about the different options, weigh the pros and cons, and consider the costs, and perhaps even put a deposit down on a future option. So, you know, and finally, I think just feel free to reach out to us for support, because we're really happy to help you.
That's right. Yeah, that's the main thing, is we're here, we're happy to help, and it is complicated, and there's lots to think about, and sometimes you just need help. You need someone to help walk you through it and help make you help get you the information to make those decisions. So anyways, thanks, Judy. That was wonderful, and that's the end of our presentation. And we've got, like I said, we'll have the recording of this, and it'll be found on our website, so feel free to take a look at that. And we're here to answer any questions. If you have personal questions, you don't want to say them on the webinar, feel free to email us or give us a call. The information is there, but we'll just open it up and see if anyone has any questions. So if you do, you can unmute yourself, or you can type something in the chat. I'm just going to take a look at the chat, see if there's any questions there. I don't know, Brenda, if you see any questions, go ahead and read them out for us.
You're muted, Brenda.
Yeah, no, I don't see any questions in the chat box yet. So
yeah, so if you're out there and you're listening and you have a question, feel free to ask. We're happy to give you our 2 cents. We won't even charge you 2 cents.
But we can't make change.
We can't make change, yeah. Oh, thanks, Shauna. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe we don't have any questions. So just, you know, if you want to refer back to this, it will be on our website. And yeah, I think we'll just leave it at that. Unless, do you have anything you want to add, Brenda, or Judy?
I don't think
else
so.
you want to share?
Like we've talked a little bit about looking at a few options, but like, how many options do you think people should reasonably look at for when they're trying to select? Like, should they start looking at 10 or 15, or because there's so many to choose from in Calgary, especially, right?
Yeah, and Edmonton and Kelowna has a lot too.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a super question. I kind of like to narrow it down kind of to 5, 4, 3. Like I think that's really manageable. And usually if we've got a really great match with, even just 3 places, that's a lot to choose from because they fit, right? That we've narrowed it down to places that fit your financial needs, they fit your healthcare needs, they fit your preferences, whether that be location or amenities. And then you're going to just see how they feel. And you go in and you're like, oh yeah, this feels like home, or no, it doesn't. And so 3 to 4 to 5 at the most. Hey, Judy, would you agree?
I would agree. And I was, in just thinking because of actually a couple of situations where that I'm right now in the middle of helping is, there's one side of it where when it's become a very stressful situation and it's a little more complicated, care needs are higher, then I find that keeping those choices down, like 3 or 4, for example, is enough because they're already feeling overwhelmed and stressed about it. So because we gather that information from them initially and we can narrow it down for them, then it's easier for them to only have to look between 3 that we know check off their boxes versus giving them too many. But I just met the other day with a couple who are probably, unless anything drastic happens, they are about 10 years out from thinking of, but they just got starting to have that conversation about what if our health changes, right? And so even though we are going to have them look at a few, again, for the reason that they're looking this far in advance, which truly is very rare, that they may only look at maybe 3 or 4 places as well, because in this example, they're just wanting to get a feel for what it's even like out there. And then I just have one more where, and this does happen sometimes, where somebody, their prime, no, how can I say? So when I'm talking with somebody and I'm asking them, various maybe features that are offered at a retirement residence, etc., and a perfect one is in-suite laundry. So I went through this list and the wife said, I don't know, it's not that big of a deal to me. I think I'd be fine with that. So I go do my legwork and my research and I come back with this report. And she said, I got thinking since I last talked to you, and I actually absolutely have to have in-suite laundry. So that literally was like, okay, no problem. And I'm thinking, I'll start again, right? Because then, like something like in-suite laundry, there's far fewer places that are able to provide that, right? So it literally was kind of starting over almost and coming back to her with, again, another set of recommendations, I guess, but keeping it down low is good, whether they're feeling overwhelmed or not, because easily it becomes too many options out there.
Right. Yeah. And Judy, on the couple in the middle that you were talking about that are looking well out, one of the things that's really smart about doing that is we know what they're looking for. And so if something new opens up, which is bound to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, these retirement residences are popping up all over the place. We know what they are looking for, and we can say, hey, here's some information you might not have known about. Here's a place that's opening. You can go look at it first. And you could even, if you love it, you could put your name on your pick of suites, right? And so it gives us the information to keep in mind. So nothing's really too early, right? I mean, it really isn't too early because we'll just revisit it when the time comes that it's more imminent. But we can kind of keep in mind places that are new or opening or, stuff like that. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I found too that even the conversation of understanding, like sort of just how you started this presentation today regarding the different kinds of care and different kinds of buildings, even for them to know, for example, if years down the road they decide to make a move just for something simple, like they're done with cooking and they just want life to be easy. But it was really helpful for them because they asked questions. For example, if there was a sudden health change, if something drastic happened, what could they expect? And they had a friend who they were familiar with, someone who moved into, well, there was a couple of scenarios actually. It was an independent living in the building, but it also had the funded supportive living unit in the same building, but it was a different wing, right? And so she said, well, I know somebody who, like, why can't you just choose that one? So even the conversation to understand the role of Alberta Health Services and what that process could look like. And so they were just relieved to understand a little bit better. You know, it could go like this or like this or like this. And they just, you know, felt better knowing, okay, well, we have a bit of a better idea of what to expect. So yeah,
that's great. All right, I wonder, does anyone else have any questions? We've just got a few people left on the call, so I guess not. All right, well, thank you, Judy, so much. Oh, Hillary Richardson is typing. Let's just wait and see what Hillary says. Anyways, Judy, thank you so much. She said thank you. You're welcome, Hillary. Thank you guys for joining us. And Brenda, thanks for helping get this set up. And Judy, thanks for all your wonderful examples. I think it really helps people to hear those examples. So yeah, we're always here. Give us a call if you need any help. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.